Good. We are recording. And I will call the October 10th meeting of the and Finance Committee to order. And we will open up this meeting with open the floor for any nominations of a committee chair.
Sure. I'd like to nominate Sarah Tishlow this morning to be chair of the Audit and Finance Committee this year.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Congratulations, Sarah.
Thanks, guys.
Of course. Here we go. Next, we'll turn it over to, we'll welcome Alan Walther from the Bonadillo Group, who's going to present our 2024-2025 independent audit and draft financial statements. Alan, welcome.
Thank you. Just to introduce myself to everybody. My name's Alan Walther. I'm a partner with the Bonadillo Group. We are the school district's external auditors. We were appointed your auditors this year after a competitive bidding process. We prepared drafts of the financial statements, which I know Tashawn printed out some, and hopefully were emailed around to everybody so that they had a chance to review. Or
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
Okay, and I also prepared that I handed out here a brief PowerPoint presentation. I think it's easier just to walk through that way, but I'm just really summarizing what is in the financial reports. So the first slide talks about the scope of services that we provide to the school district. Our primary objective is to audit the school district's financial statements and give our opinion on them. In conjunction with that, we also audit the school district's extra classroom activity funds financial statements on the cash basis. Because the school district is a local government, the audit is required to be performed in accordance with government audit standards. So we issue a report on internal control and compliance in accordance with those standards. Because the school district expends in excess of $750,000 of federal aid, the school district is required to have a uniform guidance audit, or otherwise known as a single audit. That is not yet complete, and that is not complete because the OMB has not issued a final compliance supplement for 2025. There's a little bit of chaos at the federal government these days, so stay tuned. Those reports are due 9 months after the school district's fiscal year end, so March 31st, 2026. Plenty of time. We will wrap them up when we get a final compliance supplement.
Just one
Yeah.
question.
Sarah, yes.
Is it possible to put the PowerPoint up on the screen share?
Yes, just we didn't have it ahead of time, and I apologize for that, but I will we'll take care of that now. I'll be back.
Okay. Or email it, whatever is most straightforward. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, I should have sent it over.
That's it. So good.
My bad.
Yeah.
My bad.
Oh,
My
no
bad.
worries.
We'll
I
get
just,
through it.
I love a good PowerPoint. What can I say? I don't want to come off that.
You want me to wait or keep
Yeah,
going?
let's keep moving.
Let's keep
Okay.
going. Yeah.
Okay. The next slide, summary of the results. We will be issuing an unmodified opinion on the school district's financial statements. That is the highest level of assurance we can give. That is the opinion all of the users, the state education department, the controller's office, bond rating agencies, that's what they will be looking for. Your unreserved fund balance is 4%, within the New York State's guidelines of 4% of your subsequent year's budget. There were no internal control or compliance findings. And then a big thank you to Tashawn and Matt and the rest of the business office for all of your assistance in getting the audit done. Audit's a collaborative effort, and we can't audit what's not provided. So a big thank you. We've worked with Tashawn in her previous life for many years, and yeah, the audit went very well. First year audit, very well.
In the phrase to Sean and Matt, I would certainly put the emphasis on to Sean. So appreciate all of her efforts.
Very, it was, the audit really did went very, very well. The next slide, required communications. Every time we perform an audit, we're required to communicate certain information to you. During 2025, the school district implemented GASB 101, compensated absences. GASB is the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. That's the rule setting body that all local governments must follow. We worked with the school district to implement GASB 101. It did not have a material effect on your financial statements. The school district had always recorded compensated absences in the past. GASB 101 was a incremental change. No transactions for which there was a lack of authoritative guidance, and all significant transactions had been recorded in the proper period. The next section, sensitive accounting estimates within the financial statements. You think of the financial statements as numbers. You think of numbers as exact. That's not entirely true. There are some significant estimates within the financial statements. The estimates primarily affect the school district's school district-wide financial statements. And we'll talk about the difference between those and the fund level financial statements in a few minutes. With significant estimates, depreciation, the useful lives of your buildings and equipment. Other post-employment benefits is a very significant estimate, which is actuarially computed, and that is an estimate of the school district's obligation to its retirees and to its employees who are assumed to become retirees for post-employment benefits other than pensions, which is primarily health insurance. And then finally, the net pension asset and liability and related deferred outflows and inflows that flows through to the school district from the school district's participation in the two New York State pension plans, the TRS for the teachers and the administrators, and the ERS for everybody else. Our role with regard to estimates is to evaluate them and consider if they are reasonable to the financial statements as a whole, and we did that and we believe that they are. The next slide, no significant difficulties in performing audit. We provided adjustments to the business office. The school district general ledger matches to the audit. There were very minor adjustments. No disagreements with management with regard to the application of accounting principles or access to records or anything like that. We are not aware that management consulted with other accountants, and our discussions with management were in the normal course for a professional relationship. Excuse me.
Sorry.
Um,
Refreshes, refreshes.
Perfect.
Yeah,
You got it.
thank you so much for
Thanks,
that.
The next section is a little bit of financial highlights. So as I said previously, the school district is required to present two sets of financial statements. The school district-wide financial statements and the fund level financial statement. And the difference between the two, the school district-wide financial statements at a 30,000 foot level is basically all the funds of the school districts combined together, plus your long-term assets, minus your long-term liabilities, all accounted for using the full accrual method of accounting, which means that you recognize assets regardless of when you either turn them into cash or consume them via depreciation, and you recognize liabilities regardless of when you pay them out. Whereas your fund level financial statements, you use the modified accrual method of accounting, which is the same method of accounting that you use for your budget. And on the modified accrual method of accounting, you take at most a 1 year look at your finances, right? So it matches up to your budget. So both financial statements are required, shows two pretty significantly different pictures of the school district's finances. The next page is the first school district wide financial statement summary, which is, if you have your financial statements, it's page 14, which is the statement of net position for the school district. And this shows, as of June 30th, 2025, that the school district has a deficit net position of $75 million. Okay. And then below that, I just highlighted the breakdown of that. Your total current assets were 68.5 million. Your capital asset and your TRS asset, the teachers retirement system actually had an asset this year because of the effects of the stock market, was 134 million. Deferred outflows, which flow through from the pension and OPEB plans, 27.6 million. Current liabilities, 60 million. Long-term liabilities, 191.5 million, of which your other post-employment benefits obligation is 142.3. And deferred inflows, 53.6 million. The deficit, every school district that we audit has a deficit. The Niskayuna is in line with the size of your budget. We have some, very large school districts that have, billion-dollar deficits, and it's all because you're required to recognize your entire other post-employment benefit liability of 142 million. So if you just did the quick math, took that out of there, they would put that right around to $70 million surplus. Any questions on the statement of net position? Okay. Excuse me. The next page is the reciprocal to that statement, the statement of activities. This is also the school district-wide financial statement, and this shows that your net position decreased $244,000, so a slight decrease, and that's primarily the effect of recognizing the other post-employment benefits, long-term pension and depreciation adjustments, the full accrual adjustments that are different from your fund level financial statements. The next slide is probably a little more relevant for everybody, which is the fund level financial statement, the first one, the balance sheet. So again, the fund level financial statements are reported using the modified accrual method of accounting, which matches up to your budget. The balance sheet can be found on page 16. In the balance sheet shows your total combined fund balance, excuse me, across funds of 21.4 million, of which the general fund balance was 21.2. And the breakdown of the general fund balance, restricted was 12.7. Appropriated for the 2026 budget was approximately $2.6 million. That was the amount that was used to balance the current year's budget. And then your unassigned fund balance was approximately $4.6 million, which again is within the New York State 4% limitation. The capital projects fund shows a deficit of $1.3 million. That should not be a concern of the audit committee or the board because there are bond anticipation notes outstanding of $35.9 million, which show as a liability in the capital projects fund. That's just the work of the way that governmental accounting works, as those bond anticipation notes are either redeemed from appropriations by the general fund or converted into long-term debt. The school district will recognize revenue and that deficit will be eliminated. And then non-major funds, your total fund balance was 1.5 million, of which the debt service fund accounted for 1.1 million, and your miscellaneous special revenue fund accounted for 400,000. The next page is the summary of the revenue expenditures and changes in fund balance. Again, for the fund level financial statements, this statement shows total revenue across all the funds, $113.5 million. Total expenditures, 134.6. other sources of 28.1. The other sources are primarily proceeds from debt and proceeds from leasing transactions. So for a net change in fund balance of $6.9 million, and the breakdown of the change, the general fund balance decreased $863,000, capital projects fund increased $7.5 million, and your non-major increased $232,000. The next slide is the results versus the budget, which can be found on page 54. The general fund is the only fund for which there's a formally adopted budget, right? When the voters vote, they're voting on the general fund budget. So the highlights here are your total revenue budget for the year in the general fund was 108.2 million. Your actual revenue was 108.7. So you had a net favorable budgetary variance in your on the revenue side of 504,000. Your expenditure budget was 113.4 million. Your actual expenditures were 109.6. You had encumbrances of that says 100 and that can't be, it's not 103 million. Is it 1 million or 100?
1.3.
1.3. All right. I put a zero where I decimal. 1 point. Yeah. That, sorry about, I apologize. 1.3 million in encumbrances. That sounds a little more reasonable. Encumbrances are the budgetary carryovers from 25 to 26. So that gets immediately added to your 26 budget. So you had a net favorable variance on the expenditure side of 2.5 million. So the overall favorable result versus the budget were $3 million. The next slide, the governmental auditing standards report, which is also known as the yellow book. No internal control findings and no compliance with the findings. So very favorable there. The next slide, again, the uniform guidance reports, the single audit. We started the work. There is a draft compliance supplement, but until the final version is issued, we can't release those reports. They have not issued their final version. When it does come out, we'll finish up the audit and get those reports to you. Again, they're not due until March 31st of 2026. That's the extent of my comments, unless there's any questions. You want to dive into the 60 pages? We can go through page by page, but I think I hit upon, what I think is important for the committee to know.
Thank you. I just want to open it up for any questions from the committee at this point in time.
I don't have any questions. I love the PowerPoint that sort of hits the highlights instead of going page by page. It's super helpful to focus our attention on what we need to see in here. So thank you for doing that.
I'll fix that decimal point and email it over to you.
Any questions from those who are online?
The back of my head, sorry.
No,
Great,
thank you.
Bill.
Appreciate the time.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Alan.
Okay.
Your team. Appreciate it. I want to underscore my appreciation for Tashawn's work in this, and the both of you coming together and making sure it was a very smooth process procedurally at this point. Now the financial statements will go to the board for approval on Tuesday evening, and then we'll submit it to the state by the required October 15th deadline. So really appreciate this for our first time working together. Everything went very well.
Yes, agreed. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome to stay for Ben's presentation, but you don't have to.
Yeah, that's okay. I have lots of work. October 15th is coming around the corner, so, all right, thank you all.
Thanks so much. Have a good day.
See you.
So, at this point, we'll move on to our presentation from Ben Hasmona at Fiscal Advisors. Ben will talk about some of the results from our borrowing over the past year, what we can anticipate in terms of the year ahead. And then we'll kind of close out with kind of a looking ahead to how we're managing our debt service and state building aid schedules to bring us to the 2027 capital project that we've talked about. So you'll sort of see that picture come together in Ben's presentation here. So Ben, I'll turn it over to you and just try to advance slides as we go.
Well, it's good to be back again, and I'll just kind of phrase this, it's more of a continuation now, right? So we've kind of laid the groundwork. Now we're just going to continue and update to see where we are as we move ahead. So kind of the main topics of review are going to be the 21 project, the 24 project, what's on the horizon for 27, bus financing, and then kind of I slipped in this little review of kind of some building aid things I think that are important because they're going to help to frame the 2027 project. Should also say if there's any questions or you want to stop me at any point in time, please feel free. So the 2021 project, we still had an original plan and pre-referendum of a 2-year tax increase that was met. Financings to date, we have done 2 different series of bonds, a $20 million series, each in 24 and 25. Currently we have, and this is what Alan had alluded to in the financial statements, there's a ban outstanding. Part of the $35 million ban is 25.9 million of that is related to the 2021 capital project. Just kind of a little bit of a flavor on interest rates. We did very well last year. So the ban interest, when we went to budget last year, we budgeted about 1,166,000. We came in at 907,000. Kind of what will happen in the discussion of as we start to move into 26, 27 budget and how current fiscal year is going. I'll meet with Matt and Tashawn, and the discussion will be, well, do you want to keep that savings? Or do we want to make an additional larger principal payment on the ban? You can make larger principal payments. The money's in budgeted for debt service already. If you do that, obviously, everybody knows you make a larger principal payment, long-term benefits for sure. But there's also short-term, if you want to keep that for other issues that might have popped up, that's absolutely a discussion we'll have. Last year, I talked a little bit about the DASD benefits, and we kind of have an update to that because we did dormitory authority bonds last year as well. So the district can go to the open market and issue bonds, or you can go through the dormitory authority and issue bonds. If you go through the dormitory authority, there's an interest rate that's used to calculate your building aid that would get reset if you go through the state. If you don't go through the state, the interest rate used to calculate your building aid stays at a state assumed rate. So towards the bottom, I have, if you bond in the open market, the state assumed rate would have been 2 1/8 and 3 1/2. So the state would basically say, we're going to aid you as if you could issue debt at 2 1/8, 3 1/2. Even if you sold bonds at 10%, we don't care. That's the aid. Aid gets calculated on this lower interest rate. When you bond through DASNY, which we did, your building aid gets recalculated. In 2024, it got recalculated at 3.69. 2025, it got recalculated at 4.03. So, my mind, I do an analysis that says, does it make sense to financially, does it make sense to do this, right? The next slide. Actually,
You want to go to that?
no, I'll stick to this one first. I kind of went one slide ahead of myself, but we'll go. Let's do this one first. So if you look at this benefit in 2024, I should mention all projects aid is based on an SED project number. It's not based on debt. It's not based on whether you pay cash for something. It's based on how much of the project qualifies for building aid. What are these interest rates in play? How much, what type of project is it? Is it a reconstruction project? And then also your building aid ratio. Taking all those things into effect, we had 12 SED project numbers that were bonded through 2024, 2 in 2025. I did a side-by-side kind of analysis of the estimated benefit. So if we had gone open market, you would have had building aid of 3.6 million in 2024-25, and then 3.9 million in 25-26, and so on. We went through DASNY, your building aid went up let's call it 290,000 in 24-25, 335,000 for the first foreseeable future. So a net benefit over 15 years of about 4.8 million. Last year it was about 4 million. So I like to have good news. That's always good news to share with that. So this is kind of the benefit, though. There are some people that are anti going to the state to finance capital projects. To be quite frank, I was one of those people for a long time until I see the numbers. I will run the numbers again. If you were asked a recommendation today, I would probably say the 25 million that remains to be bonded for the 2021 project will most likely go through the dormitory authority once again in the spring of 26. If you want to pop back up one slide. Just a very simplistic showing of, as of today, we have now borrowed or received money for all dollars associated with the $79 million capital project. 7.7 million in reserves. We had rebates of 490,000. And then I just show in there the new money. So I classify things as when was money first borrowed. When it's first borrowed, that means you now have it in the capital fund to spend on expenses. So we had new money borrowings in 22, 23, 24, 25, and the total is all borrowed at this point of 79 million.
Just to kind of recap that additionally, so that accounts for all of the work at the high school, some of the infrastructure work that took place a few years ago as part of the 2021 capital project at the high school, and all of the Iroquois project, as well as a portion of the Van Antwerp project. So all of the work that we've now started this past summer at Van Antwerp is really kind of a combination of what we were able to kind of put a down payment on, so to speak, in the 2021 project, and then what we're finishing in the 2024 project.
One more. This is a very busy schedule, so I'm not really going to bore you with all the intricacies and details unless you want me to. But the key component here is if you were to look at columns 12 and column 13, column 12 is the overall debt service for this project. And this is unique to the $79 million authorization alone. Column 13 is a state aid. One of the things, if you just look at this very simplistically, starting at the top, you can see the debt service starts low, then it increases to match the building aid coming in. One of the things with capital projects in school districts is that almost the bigger concern of versus interest rates is when am I going to get my building aid? The district receives about 79% building aid ratio. So let's say in 2000, when this project first passed, you could have said, hey, let's go write the bond on the entire thing. Well, you could have. You probably could have secured a very good interest rate too, but you would have not gotten the revenue coming back to you. Because again, building aid is not based on when you sell that. It's based on each project, when it was approved at the state level, and what type of project it is. So our goal is to make sure we know what the state aid flow is going to be before we recommend permanently financing. Next slide is a snapshot of the 2024 referendum. This page is a lot less busy for various reasons. The main one being is it's just kind of getting its foot in the ground. So related to the 2024 project, 2021 has completely been borrowed. 2024, we've only borrowed $10 million to date. So you had roughly an $8 million capital reserve, $10 million borrowed, so $18 million of the total authorization has now been accounted for. Our plan for this project is going to be to look at the construction cash flow, how much money will we need to pay all the contractors through 2027. And we'll again be doing a short-term financing for this project in June of 2026, which will mature in June of 2027. I mentioned that we did this $10 million initial financing was part of the ban we issued in June of 25. Same methodology. We received a lower interest rate on this ban than we had budgeted by about $100,000. So listed under column 4, I'm showing a principal payment of $685,000. When we budgeted, that was $585,000. Again, if we make the larger payment in June of 26, great. If we don't, then the $100,000 gets returned to general fund for whatever your purposes the district would like to utilize that for.
One item I just want to emphasize on both of these slides is, I know we've talked about it before, but in column 3 there, you can see the capital reserve, as well as the second line, which is our rebates through the National Grid clean energy program. That's for geothermal heat pump replacements at the high school. So we were approved for that funding. We did a first phase of it with the 2021 project. So you can see the $490,000 there. And then in the 2024 project, we did a second phase this past summer. Between the beginning of last school year and this past summer, we replaced 92 heat pumps, and we're projecting 400,000 in additional rebates that will come in through National Grid. And that was part of the financing plan for this project. And as we've kind of talked about here, obviously our largest kind of, local cash into the project has been the capital reserve, but also those rebates. And we've talked about kind of with a state building aid ratio of 79%, kind of the multiplying effect of the work that we're able to accomplish when we're able to have local resources like capital reserve and rebates to accomplish it.
Yeah, and the rebates are something we don't see very often, and it acts just like a capital reserve. So the district is not borrowing $400,000, but you're still getting building aid as if you were if you're doing an aidable project for $400,000. So it's almost like a double benefit.
Oh, we get aided on that money?
Yeah.
I guess it's more that we're aided on the overall
Yeah, but
projects.
that's offset, so it's.
So yeah, I mentioned the SAD project numbers. So let's say I don't know where those heat pumps are, what building, but let's say it's the high school. High school project goes into the state. They look at what type of work you're doing, and then we will show funding sources. But honestly, the aid isn't dependent on the funding sources. It's only dependent on, does that scope of work qualify for building aid? And are we going to pay aid over 15 years, 20 years, or 30 years? That's why a lot of districts can go out for no tax increase projects, because it's no tax increase, but they say the capital reserve offsets what that local share would have been. This is kind of, I think, probably the most important slide related to everything. It's the overall tax effort. So what I tried to show here is column 2 represents all of the local share. When I say local share, it's all of the debt service minus the building aid for all of your past capital projects. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to show of the school district's overall tax levy, this is the portion of it that goes to support capital improvement projects. So column 2 shows that in 2023, there was about a $1.8 million local share, and then it went negative. And that was something that was known for a very long time. Then we layer in the $79 million project, that local share in column 3. Debt service offsets. Alan mentioned the money in the debt service fund. That's where if the district ever wanted to use any of that money on a year-over-year basis, you could appropriate that. Column 5 is the estimated local share on the $47 million capital project. And then column 6 is the overall kind of net. So where we are right now is the first red number at around $2,965,000, which matches what we had budgeted for the 2025-26 fiscal year. When we passed the $47 million authorization, the thought was the entire tax increase was going to occur in 25-26. However, when we did the 25-26 budget development, we determined, and we had the option, let's do half the increase in 25-26, half the increase in 26-27. So that's why you'll see the number goes from $2,965,000 in the 26 line to $3,283,000 in the 26-27 year. So that's the other half of that impact that would come online in 26-27. And sitting here today, does it have to come online in 26-27? No, we will have that discussion again to see if that's the best methodology still for the district. One of the things that I like to always have is options, right? So we want to be able to have a plan, and this is what we think, but we want to have multiple avenues we can explore if things change. But as everyone knows, they never change, right? Everything stays. But the number underneath the red, you can see I did a slight blue kind of shade there where it goes down to 2,792,000. That is the target of the 2027 project. So we're going to be at a certain tax levy for capital projects. When we see a drop, that would be the opportunity, if the district so chose, to move forward with a new project to layer it in at that point in time. This is something I just want to talk about. I think it's really important, is maximum cost allowances. So every building, this gets back to the building aid piece of it, which I can't harp on the importance of that because without that revenue coming back, we're not doing a $79 million project if there's no aid coming back, right? That's certain. So each building has an allowance for construction and allowance for incidental. What the state says is, here's your maximum. You can spend this amount at that building over a 5-year period, and we'll give you 79% building. Now it has to be reconstructing what you have, but we'll give you 79%. It's over 5 years. So if you did a project today and maxed it out, it resets 5 years later. And I'll kind of show an example of that in a minute. Incidental cost, there's construction, but incidental cost is the other number. Incidental cost is site work. So it's not just soft costs. It's not just testings. It's not just council and our fees. It is your stadium. It is your parking lots and all of those things that go along with that. These will change based on construction cost indices. And what I did is I wanted to show you what a sample would look like. So the high school, which will be the next slide, the state basically says your high school has a capacity for 1,637 students, 7 through 12, and 51 special ed. That means nothing, right? But now we have to take those numbers, we multiply them by a construction cost index. And now this is a snapshot of what the high school actually looks like. So the very top number, 45,126,000, taking into account the current capacity at that building, the state says you can spend $45 million on construction at that building within a 5-year period, and then you would get your 79% building aid. Any project that's occurred within the last 5 years gets subtracted from that. So I've subtracted 3 projects from there. As we sit here today, 42.096 million is what could be spent on that building. All right. The bottom half of the number, I'll get to the red numbers in a second, but the bottom half of the number is kind of the more important. That's the incidental cost. So that's your site work and that's your soft cost. So 11.3 million roughly is the starting number. You can see the third number down, 12.5 million. That's your stadium project. So everyone knew that going into it. We were going to exceed that. So as we sit here right now, if the high school does a project, you would get no aid on construction manager, architect fees, our fees, or if you wanted to do parking lots or anything at that building. As we sit here today, the number in red represents what will happen when the projects in blue fall off. So the projects in blue are going to hit their 5-year window. They're past their 5-year window. They no longer count. So for a fall or for 2027 voter referendum, you'll be back to about 43.8 million construction at the high school and a very healthy, just over 11 million of incidental at the high school as well. So the point of that is we do this for every single facility the district has. And we can start to look at when we're planning a future referendum, what do these actually look like? Or if you're going to do a project at the high school tomorrow, I would need to include that obviously in here as well. But we're continually monitoring that because what we don't want to do is be surprised and say, pass a project that say, oops, you have to wait 3 years to do that, or oops, it's going to have no aid. We're going to know that going into it.
This is so hugely helpful to see it laid out like this because and also for the public to see, because you can see the things that need to be done, and to say we're going to wait until XYZ year to do it doesn't always, help somebody understand why. This is very clearly laid out to help folks understand if we just wait a couple years, you're going to get so much more that we're able to do in different areas. So that I've not seen it. That's helpful.
Good. Sometimes I struggle with how to lay this out, but I'm glad it made sense in this scenario. I should mention just one last thing too. So I know there was the additions at Van Antwerp and Iroquois. Since it's only reconstruction, right? Anytime you want to add footprint to a building, there's a whole other bunch of hoops to go through at the state level. But this is reconstructing what you currently have. This is a great starting point.
I think it's important to emphasize too that, depending on the circumstance, these aren't necessarily, targets for us or what we will spend. It becomes sort of that ceiling of what we know we can be aided for. If you look at our elementary schools, you'll see different numbers. We'll know what we want to do at each of those campuses. At Van Antwerp, we exceeded that allowance and we went into that kind of eyes wide open, just knowing that given our program plans at that building and what the state calculation provided as a ceiling, that we would be going above that, and it was factored into the financial plan for the project. But that's just another thing that, another factor that really underscores the importance of having that capital reserve, which kind of helps us, yes, we are going above our aid ceiling. We know that as we're factoring the cost for the project, but we also have some of that local share already, on the table. So it's not directly affecting the tax rates.
Yeah, I think that's the eyes wide open is the big key, right? This is a guideline. I have districts all the time that say, well, that's great, but at the elementary school, I need to do more work. We're going to exceed those allowances. That's great. As long as we know that going into it, we can plan financially for it. Okay. So this kind of leads into a potential 2027 project. The size of the project will depend on a number of factors. The biggest one is going to be driven by state aid. So first is how much of the project is going to be aidable. I ran a projection, which you'll see on the next slide. I estimated that 90% of the project is aid eligible. I will not know that, and no one in this room will know that until a kind of a scope is identified and we see where's the money going to be spent, what building is it going to be going to. We're also have to look at, again, the cost allowances, just like we did the high school example for all buildings. Additions, if there are any additions planned, where would they be? What kind of additions? Those types of things. The current capital reserve sits at just under 8,250,000, so that's very healthy. And your current building aid ratio is 79.4%. That can change. That's the 25-26 ratio. A quick kind of history of where those rates were. 22-23, it was 78.2, 23-24, 79.6, 24-25, 78.7, and currently 79.4. We will know the 26-27 ratio probably within 6 to 8 weeks. Those will be published. I do not anticipate, if past is any indicator of the future, it should not change that much, but it can change. Future projects. So we still have the future project was also going to be dependent on what the ultimate result of the 24 project is. And since we're still working through that, next year when we have this conversation, we will have a much better idea because we'll be through another summer of construction on that. So the next slide is the replication of the local share slide, except the only difference is I've added an additional column 6, and based on my numbering system, now I have 2 column 6s, so that's always great as well. But that was almost going to be a test. I should have known. So the first column 6 would be a representation of what would be the new local share or debt service minus building aid for a potential 2027 project. Very, very generically, I size it at $50 million, just so there's kind of a placeholder. That would be layered in beginning in the 2027-28 fiscal year. The purpose of the kind of the bluish highlight of all the cells on the far right is to show you that we're going to have the local share maintained at roughly $3,285,000. So keeping it at the level, once the 2024 project is fully layered in, it goes up to $3,283,000. A new project in 27, we maintain that level of $3,283,000. That's how you could go to the taxpayers in this instance and say it's a no tax increase project. So got it purely just for illustration purposes. I do not know what the ultimate scope will be. Hopefully we'll have another successful year. You'll have more capital reserve. Hopefully we do better on our current financing so that we have more opportunity there as well. But this is a kind of a good, I guess, starting point for the financials on the next project.
Yeah, I think just to kind of add to that, we had kind of talked last year very generally about what a 2027 project might look like. And now that we have another year kind of under our belt of both our borrowings, also our capital reserve, Ben and I wanted to kind of bring that forward really in terms of kind of an order of magnitude, saying that, all other factors being equal, no impact on the tax increase being a $50 million project. So we kind of start to contextualize that. That's obviously before the other factors that Ben mentioned, knowing things can change. It's also before we see if we're able to add any to the capital reserve this year or any decisions about local share. And it's certainly, very premature for that. But this is kind of, this combined with some other things that are happening right now as kind of foundational building blocks is kind of us entering sort of the runway for the 2027 project. On Tuesday, the couple other things I want to mention are on Tuesday, the board will be acting on the proposal from King & King for our 2025 building condition survey. And so that's kind of every 5-year requirement that we do kind of a comprehensive inventory of all of our systems, building envelopes, sites, just kind of infrastructure needs, what's at a critical stage and needs to be addressed, in the next few years, what needs to be kind of on the board for longer than that. That process also includes a 5-year facilities plan that's required to be submitted to the state, and that takes the building condition survey and also takes kind of program and facilities priorities of the district and kind of fuses those together with some things that we need to be thinking about. So that work is going to be happening in the coming months. We'll also be issuing an RFP for enrollment projections, which are another building block of any capital project. We know that our elementary schools, we have 5th grade, departing in September 2027. So we'll pick up some space there. Is that adequate? What we've heard over the course of, really several years at this point is kind of how tight the elementary schools are. So we've been so focused on middle schools, but we know that, we have some work to do there in terms of kind of the learning environment as well as space. But what do the enrollment projections say? Is picking up 3 classrooms sufficient, or do we have other decisions there? So our timeline has us at the November 18th board meeting awarding the enrollment projection RFP to a successful proposer, and then kind of having a first look at projections around February and March of this year. So and then we'll kind of, you'll see the planning process for 2027 continue from there. So, but this gives us a great start so we can kind of start to contextualize, what kind of project in terms of size might we be looking at. Although, the needs that we identify through the building condition survey, that will be huge, because that will be a real look at, current status of our buildings and what needs to be done. And we haven't gone through that process for 5 years. We've checked a lot of things off the list through the 2021 and 2024 project, but we also know that other systems and buildings have continued to age, and that's kind of a continual process.
Kind of the last thing just to touch on is the annual bus financing of the district. We're set to sell a 5-year bus bond in November of this year. So right around the corner. And just, I guess the only other thing I'll really point out here, different than when I was here last year, is that last year the state had, if you're buying EV buses, they were going to age over 12 years. They did come to the realization that 12-year was a little bit too long, and that no bus, let alone anything we drive around here, is going to last 12 years with the salt and everything. So they shortened that to 8 years. So now if any EV buses are purchased, they would receive 8 over 8 years. Still regular gas or diesel or propane would still be over 5 years, but that's the real change. And once we sell the bus bond in November, it will give a definitive number for the 26-27 budget. So that will be one other item that's a known number right away. So.
And that was a very helpful shift that we made with Ben, was restructuring the timing of that borrowing. So we enter the budget cycle knowing exactly what that figure is for the bus aid and debt.
That's all I got for it.
Thanks so much, Ben. At this point, I think we'll open it up to any questions or feedback from committee members.
I don't have any questions. Thank you. It was very clearly laid out, easy to follow. And I think it's really helpful for everybody to hear the thought that goes into the planning for every single thing that we do with the monies that are entrusted to us. So it's appreciated to have these discussions.
Yeah, I just want to thank Ben, not only for the work day in and day out that goes into the planning and the borrowing and making sure that we're accurately projecting our aid, but also for the educational component that goes along with that. Very easy to work with and easy for us then to kind of actualize that in annual budgets and make sure that we're all on the same page. So thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. we've left ourselves a couple minutes for the 2027 budget development calendar. It's kind of crazy how much we're saying 2027.
Mhm.
So this budget development calendar back there will look very similar to years past. We envision a process that's very similar, although we certainly want to learn from past years and incorporate any feedback that we have from this committee and the full board and members of our leadership team. I kind of like to think of this as kind of a few different avenues that are all kind of moving in tandem at times, but you'll see at the start, we have kind of a public information and again, foundational building block of establishing our budget priorities. We've done that through a thought exchange over the past few years with community, and we anticipate doing that again in early December. Then there's the portion, and with the time that we have, which I'll really kind of focus on the flow of committee and board meeting dates to get us to the point where we have a budget proposal for the community. And then there's that last phase where we have a budget proposal. There's certain legal deadlines that we need to meet in terms of publication and notice to voters, submissions to the state education department, and just communication with the community. So that's that last phase, and I think we're all familiar with it. So I'll focus quickly on kind of the committee's work and the board's work as part of the process, and try to leave a couple minutes for any comments or feedback. So we envisioned in early December having that thought exchange open. This committee meets on December 12th. At that point, we'll still have the thought exchange live, and we'll be gathering feedback on budget priorities, but just given our meeting calendar for both the committee and the board on the 16th, we'll kind of bring forward some kind of preliminary themes that we see in what the community is asking for us to consider as part of the budget process. In January, and then those discussions will really incorporate what we bring back to the board on January 13th as budget priorities that we would hope to kind of all establish that evening. Also in January, kind of side by side from that, we don't have the date yet, but the governor will release the executive budget proposal, which will give us an idea of state aid at that point. Although we know, then that just kicks off the negotiation with the legislature. And then we'll be having our leadership budget conferences, which are department by department and school by school, assessing needs and priorities for the next year. We'll bring preliminary budget assumptions to the board on January 13th. The 30th, this committee will meet again. At that time, we'll really have everything we need to take a in-depth look at revenue. We'll be able to make some assumptions or estimates based on the governor's budget proposal. We'll be able to really have almost everything at that point we need to take a look at our tax cap, particularly with all the work that Ben does, and when we know how that relies on debt as well as anticipated state aid. We'll look at our preliminary budget assumptions, and at that point, we'll have kind of, I wouldn't say a list of proposed budget investments, but at that point, I think we'll be able to say, here are some of the things in our leadership conferences that are bubbling to the top that are on our radar as we think about it. But of course, we've got to balance revenue with expenses at that point in terms of what we're able to fund going into the next year. And then February 10th, we'll bring kind of revenue to the board, and then we'll talk about that maintenance of effort budget, which is what will it take to continue everything that we're currently doing. We'll look at how that compares with available revenue for the year. And then on the February 24th board meeting, we would envision bringing a first draft budget. March 1st, we need to submit our tax cap to the state. March 10th, we'll bring a recommended budget to the board. And the nice thing about our meeting schedule for the year is not only will we have discussion that night, but that Friday morning, this committee will meet and we'll be able to get into a little bit more depth about our recommended budget and some feedback so that we can on the 24th bring back a proposed budget, have some discussion, and potentially have adoption that night, although that's certainly nothing that we need to decide on right now because we have kind of the date of April 14th is kind of an additional date where we could adopt the budget and still meet all of our timelines. So that's kind of a sprint through the budget process. I I certainly, you know, will bring this forward to the board at its November I'm not sure, at its November meeting, I think it's the 18th. But happy to take any discussion or questions now. Also can take feedback from the committee at any point and just incorporate it into what we bring forward. But at a certain point, this really becomes an important roadmap for us, and we want to make sure that it works for the committee and the board as well.
I
It's
think
great.
this looks great. My only request is that I understand that there is also quite a few bargaining units that are going to be bargaining during the same time. So I think it'd be really helpful for us to understand the timing of that and how it overlays with this calendar. So if it would be possible to follow up, and I'll leave it to you to decide how it makes sense to present it, but just some overview information of the key dates in that process so that we understand when that information might become available and when those kinds of decisions are being made.
Absolutely, we can provide that. Thank you. It's
Awesome.
very important. Okay, happy. I know that was quick, so I'm happy to take feedback at any point from the committee. I think it's to our last agenda item, which is the minutes from our September 12th. I apologize. Committee charter is there. It's not linked. We had that on the agenda at the last meeting, and we can have it on the next one and then bring it forward to the board following that point. That will bring us to the minutes for September 12th. There a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Second.
Libby
All
got
in
it.
favor?
All in favor.
Excellent. All right. And it's 9:30 on the dot.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor.
Oh, I can't vote. Yeah.
All right. Thank you,
Thank you,
guys.
everyone.
Thank you. Thanks.
Right.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Where is Sarah's appointment?
Yep.
As chair of this committee.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, so we make the selection here, we vote on it here, and then it's a recommendation we bring forward to the board that approves.